Some stunning numbers about Paul Millsap. A different perspective on Al Jefferson and Devin Harris. They're just great. Will we ever talk about them? A look at what the Pacers did to the Heat. It's all coming up on today's edition of Tip Off. Boom, 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 boom. Let's talk LeBron and how he's struggling. Boom, 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 boom. Let's talk about Dwayne Wade and Spoelstra's fight. Boom, 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 boom. What about Blake Griffin and just one rebound? Boom, 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 boom. Hey, I want to talk about Spurs. No, don't do that. Boom. Dude, I can totally see it. Like every production meeting at ESPN and everything else today, it's going to be ridiculous. Hey, we could talk about da-da-da. We could talk about da-da-da. Let's talk about the Spurs. Nah. Let's talk about the Spurs. Nah. Let's talk about the Spurs. Nah. They're just great. I mean, maybe historically great. We won't talk about them. Having been through the Spurs series, when you watch the Spurs play the Clippers, you know what's coming. It's only a matter of time. They've won 16 straight games by an average of 17 points. I mean, what they are doing to people is ridiculous. It's historical. I haven't done the research. I don't actually have access to the research. I can't tell you necessarily all of the who's ever done anything like this, but I'm not sure there's ever been a team in NBA history that's won 16 straight games by an average of 17 points. These guys were 12-9. They're 43-7 since. That's on pace to win 70 games. And in 3 of those 7 losses, Parker, Duncan, and Manu didn't play. I mean, I can just keep going. Since April 1st, they're shooting 50% as a team from the field, 40% from 3, and 80% for the free throw line. It's ridiculous. They last lost on April 11th. They're great, and no one's talking about them. I could watch them play forever. I mean, when they played us, it was frustrating. But I watch them now playing somebody else. I can just watch them play. They're fabulous. Just fabulous. The ball moves, the patience, the understanding, unflustered. When someone actually scores on them or they miss, it's a surprise. They're great. Which leads to a little bit from our perspective. Hey, Chris Paul looks like crap. Devin Harris was terrible, but maybe do we have to give Devin Harris a little bit of a break? Since Chris Paul is the measuring stick of all point guards in the NBA right now, and he looks awful, and Devin Harris didn't look very good for the Jazz in that playoff series, but suddenly Devin Harris doesn't look nearly as bad when you compare it to what you're seeing from a guy that's, quite honestly, a lot better than Devin. How about Al Jefferson? Blake Griffin got 1 rebound last night. Do we suddenly have to reevaluate some of the criticisms on Al Jefferson? Frankly, nobody's guarded their pick and roll. Tiago Splitter was rolling down the middle again. Tiago Splitter's the 4th best player in the NBA as the roll man on the pick and roll. So he gets Al Jefferson on a bunch of times. Maybe he's really good at it. I go back to a post-game show, which was then on 1320 K-Fan. Turned out probably to be the last post-game show ever on 1320 K-Fan. Little did we know at the time. Or maybe we did. Who knows? What you knew? I guess the blogosphere has been all over this, knew before I did. Who knows? Anyway, that's irrelevant. The games are moving to 1280, the zone, which is the point of that if you didn't understand all that. But if you go back, Phil Johnson on the postgame show was talking about the biggest mistakes he ever made in his career were when he evaluated a player off a playoff series. And I think that can go both ways. Isaiah Thomas spent a lot of money paying Jerome James because he matched up well against Sacramento when he was with Seattle. Ostertag would have one great playoff series and then a bad one, everyone freak out. Well, he's not a player who's good enough to do anything other than just play on based on the matchup he has. Maybe this matchup is just bad for everybody. Blake Griffin is being forced to play from the outside the same way Al Jefferson was. Watch Duncan guard Blake Griffin, and suddenly Blake Griffin's 1 of 6 from 3 to 9 feet. He hits 3 of 5 from 16 to 23, and that's what Al had to do. You look at Chris Paul. Chris Paul got to the rim once last night. Well, suddenly that feels an awful lot like what happened to Devin Harris. So maybe we have to reevaluate a little bit what we're seeing and what we just felt about our guys in that series. Seems as though, at least from my perspective, I would say that that's probably something we all should consider. I'm in the midst of my season in review of Paul Millsap. I may put these by the wayside and start some draft stuff, continue with these, whatever, not sure. Has to do with some technical issues that when I'm leaving town for a while in June and I actually can't do some of my draft stuff because I don't have the programs on my laptop. So that's important. But the Paul Millsap continues. Synergy Sports will come today. I hope to have that done 10, 11-ish. But I will tell you one thing that I've been working on and looking at is Paul Millsap's isolation defense. When a big isolates him and tries to beat him one-on-one, Paul's brilliant. This year, according to Synergy Sports, when players went one-on-one on Paul, they shot 28%. I'll say that again. They shot 28%. He forced turnovers in 11% of those possessions, and he didn't give up a single and one the entire year. When a big guy posts him up and gets deep on him, sure, that's a problem. We knew that. But if he can get a guy to straighten up on him and suddenly becomes an isolation circumstance and Paul's guarding him out there, Paul doesn't get beat. Paul might be better handling some of the four stuff than we think he is. This is not new, by the way. Last year, he forced 17% of all plays into turnovers off the isolation and only allowed people to shoot 36%. He did a nice job this year defensively improving getting out on stretch fours. He only allowed 33% shooting from three on spot-ups this year, in contrast to the 40% he allowed a year ago. Really, Paul's weakness defensively is he's just not tall enough. Otherwise, statistically, he comes out as though he does about everything you could possibly imagine he could do. He gets beat up in the post a little bit. Allows about, as I said, 49% shooting. But on everything else, anything that involves movement, off a screen, guarding the pick-and-roll guy, all those kind of things, well above league average. And very good at those things. Some people might be hearing and say, well, it means he translates well to the three. I'm still very reluctant on that, but, maybe. I think at times. What's hard to tell on the whole argument of the three is, was Millsap at the three what made that successful, or was it simply having favors on the floor? By the way, the ultimate sign of how great the Spurs are is the fact that Clipper fans are going nuts the same way we did about how Eric Bledsoe has to play 35 minutes a night. And Jazz fans were going nuts that Derek Favors has to play 35 minutes a night. Guys, neither of them are going to make a difference because they're that good. I cannot wait to watch them play Oklahoma City. I think they might blast Oklahoma City. I really do. They're not playing someone as the Clippers. Though, you know what? The Clippers are not that different than the Lakers. I was about to make the comment that they're not playing someone as good as the Lakers. And maybe they're not. But on the other end, the Lakers finished one game above the Clippers for the season. So they're not that different. Their point differentials were the Clippers was actually better than the Lakers. I got it, experience, this and that. Kobe sat some games out. They actually won those games. There's not a great difference. There's not a dramatic difference between the Clippers and the Lakers. The only dramatic difference is that the Clippers are playing the Spurs and look terrible. Same way we did. But the Spurs are just great. It's really fun to watch. No one will talk about it for the next 24 hours. I feel like I'm going to take that mantle as the out-of-town guy that's actually going to talk about this team. They're boring. There's nothing boring about them. It's electric to watch them. The ball moves. They get into their offense early. They're up-tempo. It's funny is Phoenix wasn't boring when they played an up-tempo, similar style of game and scored all these points, and yet somehow San Antonio has been classified as boring. I'm not sure I get that. What Indiana did to Miami was something else. And truthfully, this happens in playoffs. I mean, even you go back to when we were getting blasted in Game 2 by the Spurs, we suddenly went back through Jazz history, and what we found were that some of the best Jazz teams ever had some of the worst moments of all time, where they were really horrendously terrible. And so I think that happens in playoff games, that a playoff, it gets away from you, runs away from you, and things go awry. But Miami cannot score without Chris Bosh. And I'm looking at their roster, and other than maybe playing Mike Miller a lot more, like their change this game was to get rid of Adonis Haslam and take him out of the rotation, which surprises me a little bit because he's kind of been their cornerstone guy. But they don't, I don't, LeBron took 22 shots to get 22 points. He only went to the free throw line 3 times. Indiana's really interesting because Indiana is a starless team. Danny Granger's just not a star. He's good, but he's not a star. And it's an interesting model for us. They are 11 deep. Every guy's got a little spot on how he plays. They built this thing well. They cleared a bunch of cap space. They still have a bunch of cap space for next season, a lot of which will go to Roy Hibbert. They drafted well. They do not have anyone on their roster that is a top 10 draft pick. Think about that. They do not have a single player on their roster that's a top 10 draft pick. And somehow they are up 2-1 on Miami. They're a starless, balanced, executing team that is defending at a very high level. It's very, very impressive. Very, very impressive. It's a good, interesting model for us to look at a little bit. Final note on the day, in a shorter version of the tip-off, probably where we'll be for most of the summer. I guess it's a big deal. I was talking to a buddy. I was on a bike ride yesterday with a buddy, and I was like, why is everybody so amazed that Kobe is slipping? And his point was most people don't follow it as crazy as you do, and so people don't realize it's what's going on. To me, the idea of the Lakers losing to Thunder is a non-story. Never in the history of the NBA has a player who's played 40,000 regular season minutes led his team to a conference final, maybe even to a conference final, but definitely to an NBA final. It defies what you're able to physically do. The Lakers have been, unlike the Spurs, who moved the team over to Tony. The Lakers have been unwilling to take the game away from Kobe as much, and they were better at it in Game 2 and turned the team over to Bynum or Gasol, and therefore they can't win. They're not a threat. By the way, I'd be stunned if either home team won both back-to-backs. I think I mentioned that before, but the Lakers have and the Clippers both play back-to-back. I think both those series are 3-1, heading to the inevitable showdown of Oklahoma City, San Antonio, which will probably have no ratings and be great basketball. Have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself. Thanks for tuning in to Tip Off. And again, my apologies for yesterday. I just screwed up, I think. I just never published it. See ya.